afternoon. I hope you guys been having a fantastic week. I know I am. And for today's episode, we have a very special guest for you guys. He is a professional animator working on shows that will blow your mind. So I'm going to go ahead and allow him to introduce yourself. So please introduce yourself and tell us the name and the shows that you are a part of.
Yes, hello, I'm Travis Fowler, and I'm the creator of Dungeon Flippers, the fantasy real estate show that I'm making.
That's amazing. And I gotta say, from watching the show and the episode, the pilot, it was amazing. I honestly didn't realize how well real estate would work in like a fantasy world.
Thank you.
So what made you get into the world of animation?
Ooh, it's been a lifelong passion of mine. Like, as early as I can remember, I was always glued in front of a TV watching cartoons, and that's never really stopped too much to an extent. So no matter what profession or what line of passion I pursued in my life, cartoons were always very close to it. It seemed, in many ways, only natural that I ended up where I am.
That's amazing. Shoot, I remember watching shows like American Dragon, Drake Long, Danny Phantom, Jimmy Neutron, and as I got older, just cartoons. My parents always told me I would grow out of cartoons, but it's just something about the animation, the style, and the passion that these people put into it. It's just hard to get away from it.
True, I agree.
What were some of the shows you were glued to the TV?
Ooh, so let's see. Being a millennial, a 90s kid, I grew up watching a lot of Nicktoons. So, Hey Arnold, Rugrats, Doug, the kind of... Nickelodeon bought out the Tiny Toons, so Tiny Toons a lot, and old Looney Tunes, and we had a lot of VHS tapes of old cartoons. And then kind of later on, I got into those, early 2000s Cartoon Network shows, and in my adolescence, discovering anime, and starting small and working my way up.
That's amazing. I know my sister loved, and I mean loved, Rocko's Modern Life, and I gotta say,
Yes.
we were rewatching some of the episodes because Netflix put out a movie a couple years back as like a proper finale. Right. And the amount of adult jokes in that show is hilarious.
Yes.
She got so embarrassed because we're rewatching this and she's like, oh my God, how did they get away with this?
It's wild. And it's also one of those things, I think a lot about how, a kid's show should be about kids doing kid stuff. And I was like, man, I was watching Rocko's Modern Life. Like, they are always, like, dealing with adult problems in Rocko's Modern Life, like maxing out your credit card or, getting addicted to biting your fingernails and stuff. Like, it's honestly more of an adult show than a kid's show in some ways.
I mean, yeah. I mean, the only other show I could say in recent years that have kind of taken up that mantle is definitely The Wonderful World of Gumball. I can't tell you how many episodes. I'm there like, how did they get away? Like, this is incredibly smart. And recently, one of my friends has a kid and he loves Bluey. And I was sitting down watching some episodes. And I'm like, this is amazing. This isn't like Dorothy.
It's really good.
Yeah, it's not like Dora the Explorer where you're pounding your head against the wall, asking yourself, why am I watching this? Like, they actually have a good story, and they don't like beat around the bush.
Yeah, you don't have to have it be super like simplified narratively or even humor wise to appeal to kids. Like, it's genuinely a show for everybody, and that's really cool.
Yeah, no, definitely. So, what was the inspiration for Dungeon Flippers? Because like I said before, real estate in a fantasy world is a fantastic idea. Was there like a one session of Dungeons and Dragons where you're like, you know what, I have an idea?
A little bit. Like, it definitely came from a lot of different influences. But no, yeah, playing Dungeons and Dragons a lot definitely had a big part of it. When playing Dungeons and Dragons, you spend a lot of time in dungeons. And in that, like, you have a lot of these kind of casual moments where you're walking around, musty old mines and stuff, and you'll end up running into monsters. And I remember distinctly one of the campaigns that we did, just, we do the old adventuring thing. We check a door, we open a room and see what's inside. But there were, some orcs who were just, sleeping, and they had beds. And, it's their home. This is dungeons are where monsters live. It would be very much like if a stranger burst into my house and we're trying to loot things. But seeing the idea of like this place, like a dungeon where adventures happen, but having it also be, where life and where living and a sense of home in these seemingly unlivable places. I find that very fascinating.
That is very fascinating. And I mean, the possibilities are endless, especially with how many different monsters there are in a fantasy realm. I mean, you could take inspiration from Greek mythology, Egyptian mythology, or even American, and you'll have so much to work with. It's insane.
It's true. And even like a lot of myths and dare I say even human history is a lot about like land acquisition and you know, there's a lot of myths about, you know, building fortresses or like, you know, seizing control of certain lands and everything. In many ways, what is like conquering or exploring and all that stuff, but like a real estate game, but a bit more violent.
Gotcha. And when it comes to like deciding on what monster you want to use, what other process is there that goes into making an episode?
Ooh, yes. Because for the pilot we had, it was house hunting for a particular client, in this case a wizard. But there's also different things like there'll be episodes where it's more like renovation based or like purely flipping or purely selling. But yeah, having the clients in particular are such fun, like, set pieces to work with, so to speak. But no, like, I always love different kinds of mythical monsters and everything. So trying to find and getting into the mindset of what a home could be for a sphinx or a wizard or like a gargoyle and how that they would react to different kinds of living situations. It lends itself to a lot of really interesting scenes and scenarios.
That's amazing. And when it comes to making an episode, do you have like an entire team or do you do everything besides the voice acting yourself?
Let's see. As far as for a lot of it is done by myself personally. I'm the solo writer for the show. And in the case of the pilot, I did like the boards, like almost all of the animation, a lot of the work for it. Ideally, moving forward, I'd like to have a little more help. The background team was probably the most numerous of assistants and people helping out, but it's been largely on my shoulders up to this point.
Gotcha. So whenever you're done working on the animation and you want to make a background animation and stuff like that, who's your go-to? Do you have like a specific person that you're friends with, or is it like a company that you've been working with?
Well, yeah, fortunately, I have been working in the Atlanta animation industry for a while now, so I have a good ready list of a lot of talented artists and friends who have skills, and so it's very much just being like, who's got the time to help me out with this a little bit, and so I had a good list of people to help to ask on the short list.
That's amazing, and it's always good to hear that like you have like some people who can help you out. And I'm gonna be honest, I didn't even know Atlanta had an animation industry or anything like that. Is that new, or has it always been around and I'm just ignorant?
It's been around for a while. I think it first got its start, to my knowledge, back in the days of like Space Ghost Coast to Coast.
Really?
Yeah, I think that was one of the first. I mean, the voice actor for Brack, I think, was the guy who basically made it with the help of some other local animators in Atlanta. And so a lot of those early Adult Swim shows were made in Atlanta, and like Aqua Teen Hunger Force and a lot of those kinds of things. But now like we've had like Archer, all of the animation for Archer was done in Atlanta, and a lot of like Netflix shows that I've worked on and different things have been made here. I think Harvey Birdman, I'm not too sure, but no, there are quite a few shows have been made in Atlanta.
Wow, I got to give Atlanta more credit. That's impressive, especially Aqua Team Hunger Force. That's one of my favorite TV shows, and that's impressive. I didn't even know it was based in Atlanta. I got to give one of my friends an apology. So, how many hours of work usually goes into creating an episode, especially in the animation part?
Ooh, so much. I was just calculating a little bit earlier because I think it took me about 1.5 years to make this pilot episode. And I was just running the numbers. It takes several thousand hours, at least, to make an episode of a cartoon. Usually with studios, that'll be dispersed amongst several people. But no, like every episode of everything from the biggest blockbuster to the like the cheapest looking show or indie thing, like requires at least a couple thousand hours.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And like how does everything like connect together when you're like making like characters move and everything else? Do you have to like go back and redraw something because you're like, dang it, it doesn't work and all that stuff?
Sometimes, usually it's best to be organized and prepared and planned. Which is something I definitely have learned on the job. The idea of, getting your script as clean as you can or as ready as you can, making storyboards and really taking into account things like how the shots hook up and continuity and all that stuff and the timing for everything to be just right, so that when you do get into animation, there's not a long pause at the end of every shot or like weird continuity errors between scenes. So just being very mindful of all those things as early as possible to avoid headaches in the future. But sometimes you still got to go back and make some fixes.
Yeah, of course. And I'm not very familiar when it comes to animation and how you guys choose, but how did you choose the style or the art style you wanted to go with when it came to making dungeon flippers?
Ooh, yes. I know, like, it's very, the style of it is very much my own personal drawing style, which is useful for me. So to choose that one. I like clean lines. I like kind of simple, minimalish designs. Obviously, there's a lot of details on the characters that could be taken out, I suppose, but finding that balance of detail. And I like things that are a little bit kind of on the cutesier side, colorful. A lot of it's just all personal taste in this case. So kind of finding that balance of detail and style and shapes. I don't know. Yeah, a lot of it, since this is such a passion project for me, just coming up with character designs and art direction that personally I enjoy looking at.
That's amazing, and I'm glad that you're definitely doing it in your style, so it makes things easier. And so when it came to the pilot, were there some ideas that you had, but you had to put them on hold or save it for another episode because it just wouldn't fit?
Yes, quite a few things. Because the world of Dungeon Flippers, to me, is very vast, and there's a lot of neat lore and world building and fun things and places and people. And you can't put that into a 15-minute pilot while also telling a story about one very particular thing. Even I think it was in one of my earlier drafts of the script, because there's more characters who are dungeon flippers than just Molly and Cleveland. There's like a broker who owns the company. There's a lead contractor, a secretary, and a human resources manager, which in this case is a necromancer. But since this was a house hunting episode, there wasn't much of a reason for them to be around. And in one of my earlier drafts of the script, there was like a whole scene where, everyone shows up, everyone does a little jokey bit or something like that, and then leaves. And like, it was all in the first act. And I was like, these characters don't show up later. Like, it adds an extra 5 minutes of animation I have to do. Like, I'll have to save that for episode 2 or something, because I had to keep it as trim as possible. But no, there's so much of this world I want to show off, but you only got so much time.
Yeah, of course. And when you created each character, do you already have, of course, for the ones we haven't seen, already have like a voice actor in mind for these characters, or a basis of how you want them to sound? Or whenever you meet with a voice actor, you get their idea of what the character will sound like?
It's a little bit of a synthesis. Usually I don't have anyone particularly in mind when coming up. I don't have an actor in mind typically, but usually I might have an idea of how their voice would sound. They're gonna have a deep voice or have an accent or something, but I don't have like a person picked out typically. But then, if I find someone who has a very similar voice or has that same kind of tone, in this case, Molly and Cleveland are actually voiced by two of my friends, and so getting them into the booth, and then they provided little bits of nuance and elements that I hadn't envisioned for the characters, but became kind of part of how they sound. So they brought a little bit of something to the table that wasn't originally there when I brought them in.
That's amazing, and the fact that they added that nuance definitely adds some life to the characters. Most of the time I've actually worked within the realm of audio dramas, so I definitely have talked to a lot of creators who've talked about writing characters and then getting voice actors to fill those roles, and then it's completely different from what they envisioned, but it just made so much more sense when somebody else was talking in their voice for their character.
That's true.
So how many seasons of Dungeon Flippers are you wanting to make?
I mean, ideally, lots and lots. What is it, like 7 seasons in a movie or whatever, would be really nice. I would be satisfied with 2. But ideally, because I have like a certain number of character arcs and storylines that could be made if I had the funding and the time and the resources. I could easily see it lasting like 5+ seasons, but you have to kind of adapt to whatever limits you have. So right now I'm currently living life one episode at a time, but I could definitely envision writing like tons and tons of seasons.
That's amazing. And besides Dungeon Flippers, are you currently planning on making any new animated shows down the line, either within the realm of Dungeon Flippers or its own separate thing?
I know I've made several older ideas that are also fantasy themed, which, the height of one's narcissism, like do a big universe of different things. But for now, I'm mostly just focusing on Dungeon Flippers. It really is kind of the culmination of all the things I like into one IP, and so I'll see how far I can get with that. Like down the line, there's always possibilities. Like I said, just kind of living in this world for a little bit, there's already a lot of fun different directions and places and stories that aren't necessarily real estate related, but could be fun to explore.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so when going through the pilot of Dungeon Flippers, were there any tech regrets or production mistakes that you can laugh about it now, but back then was like an oh my god, it's a big deal?
Right. Now I think one of the things that I definitely kind of kicked myself for was just with different in the production pipeline. Ideally, there should be some overlap between the different departments. Like the big thing was I didn't start the backgrounds until a good ways, like pretty far along the animation process. When really, like, if I had brought on my background artist team back when I started animating, we probably would have been done with the pilot maybe like 4 or 5 months sooner. So having that sense of doing multiple parts of the process at the same time is important, because otherwise, it's like, oh, let me animate the whole thing, then we do all the backgrounds. It's like we can do those things at the same time, or have, as long as there's more than one person doing it. So that was something I'm definitely regretting. I'm like, wow, should have got them in sooner.
Well, one of the best things is that everybody learns from mistakes, and who knows, maybe down the line, whenever you get bigger, because obviously Dungeon Flippers is going to get bigger, you'll be able to have a standby team and be able to like work with them fluently. I mean, shoots, with how well the pilot was, I wouldn't be surprised if you'll be able to just grow bigger with an audience.
Yeah, that would be great.
So you mentioned before that you're part of the animation industry in Atlanta. What, besides Dungeon Flippers, have you worked on any other animated shows before?
Yes, let's see. The first show I worked on was a show called The Awesomes, which was a Seth Meyers superhero show that was on Hulu that ran for 3 seasons. I worked on 2 seasons of that. I worked on a handful of other shows. Let's see. I was lead animator on the first season of Netflix's Mulligan. I worked on season 2 of Dan Harmon's Harmon Quest show, which was a lot of fun for me because it's him playing Pathfinder, the role-playing game, and then like we got to animate a lot of his role-playing game shenanigans. And more recently, things like the first season of Koala Man on Hulu. A lot of kind of sitcom type cartoon shows I've worked on over the past 10 years or so.
That's amazing.
Oh yeah, speaking of, you mentioned liking Aqua Teen Hunger Force. I got to animate a little bit on the recent movie they made, the Plantasm movie. I got to animate on that one.
Nice. Were you able to meet any of the voice actors when you were doing that?
Unfortunately, no. I've animated a lot of celebrity voices, but I've yet to ever meet any of them.
Gotcha. And throughout all the shows, which one, and of course this is excluding Dungeon Flippers, because I figured that'd be your answer. What is your most favorite show you've worked on so far?
Right. I think probably Harmon Quest, just because of that fantasy element and the role playing element. There were a lot of scenes because that entire show was improvised because it was all just them role playing and getting to animate some of the the silly banter that they were just kind of ad-libbing or doing. That I think I had a lot of fun working on that show.
I mean, I bet. I've seen one of my friends loved that show, and they would always watch it, and I'd see some of the episodes, and I'd laugh too. Honestly, it was just great, and the way it was animated was fun because instead of picturing what was happening in your mind, you could just see it, and it was just so much fun. And you could take it as seriously as you wanted and still have a blast laughing. So Harmon Quest was definitely one of those things, and that's awesome that you were a part of that. So what has been, with all the shows you worked on, and of course it being more the sitcom genre and all that stuff, is there like a genre type show that you haven't gotten into but would like to?
Ooh, it's interesting. I was thinking about this, and part of me is like, well, I haven't done much like sci-fi stuff or like more cinematic-y type things. Although that being said, I always kind of skew towards comedy. But I mean, there are shows that, walk the line between both. So I don't know, science fiction might be a fun change of pace, even though I'm very much a fantasy head.
Hey, that's awesome. I mean, and the thing with science fiction is while it's similar in fantasy in some ways, it's completely different because I think you could be a lot more creative with some of the space aspects of science fiction and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So now, one thing about animation that I wanted to ask, what do you think is harder in the aspects of creating the show? Do you think writing the show is harder, or do you think animating the show is harder since you do both?
Right. I definitely got to say animating is a lot harder. Although some of that might just be because, I don't know, I writing, well, granted I enjoy doing both, but writing for me is very much like just pure imagination, like putting everything on the page and kind of, maybe cleaning it up or trimming it down as you go. But it's it's very easy to write, they walk through a crowded marketplace. But even doing one shot animating a crowded marketplace can be an absolute nightmare and take you weeks and weeks to do. So animating is very difficult, even for someone who does it for a living.
I can only imagine. I am terrible at drawing stuff, so me writing down persons jumping through the air while glowing and me having to draw it are going to be two completely different things. That's already a nightmare in itself. Like if someone tells me to draw that, it's not happening. It's just going to be a stick figure with like lines protruding from it. And I'm like, yep, that's it. I'm done. So with all your experiences, what keeps you passionate about the medium?
Ooh, I think back to like what got me into this game from the beginning. There's something really magical about pressing that play button after you've like made a pass of animation or like you finished like an edit of something. Just to see it all come together at the end always like makes it worth the thousands of hours that you put into it. So very much similar to climbing up a big mountain and then like, it's very difficult, but then you turn around at the end and it's like, oh dang, this is actually pretty nice. This is really cool. And yeah, and I think particularly with animation and a lot of the things that are out there these days, like there's a lot of really neat and like budding ideas and talents that are popping up, and it's nice to be a part of that and of those who are, making cool stuff.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I know the indie animation market is exploding in recent years, especially after Disney, HBO Max, and some of the other studios have done a terrible job and an injustice to a lot of animators, especially when it comes to their dream projects, and just been throwing them away. I mean, one show that comes to mind is Infinity Train, and another one is Final Space. How they were just discarded was just terrible. Yes. And it just sent a message to the animated world saying, hey, I think at this point we're gonna have to do things ourselves, and it's been successful for a lot of people.
Right. No, yeah, it's always interesting that I feel like, well, we look to film and animation as like it's like almost like a checking the pulse of the creativity of the world. And I feel like it's interesting that it doesn't, creativity and inspiration never really dies or goes away. Like, it just changes where it's happening. Right now, or for a long time, so many of us have been inspired by like Cartoon Network or Disney or what have you. But yeah, a lot of those aren't feeling as creative as they used to be. And it's interesting to see that like the creativity is really just, it's coming out from other places, like on the internet. That although it's very discouraging, it's nice to know that this kind of passion hasn't become extinct. It's just hidden away somewhere, and it to be found again.
So you definitely agree with what a lot of people say, that the viewpoint of animation and the passion project of it is vastly different than it was like 20, 30 years ago to now.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Granted, I'm trying to think of what the indie scene was like 20 years ago. It probably would have been a little more harder to find, but well, I mean, there was like the What a Cartoon show. There were a lot of pilot shows back at the turn of the millennia that had a lot of promising ideas. So yeah, I agree.
Okay. And so with you working on so many different projects and of course your own project, what are some of the people that you've had the pleasure of working with within the world of animation?
Ooh. It's interesting because, yeah, like I said, the Atlanta animation industry is it's not as known widely as, like, say, the West Coast folks. We have a few people, in town, like some of the original, like, Aqua Teen Hunger Force guys and stuff. But a lot of it has been kind of a lot of really talented artists that nobody knows about. People who've worked in the industry for, several decades. That I've come to know, but no recognizable legends that I think most people would know about. But a lot of very talented people.
That's awesome, and that's awesome you got to work with them. Again, I'm still in awe that you worked on Aqua Teen Hunger Force. That's, like I said, one of my favorite shows. Now, when it comes to animation, what are some of the misconceptions about the world of animation that people might have? For example, is everyone who makes them super rich, getting funny super easy? What are some of those misconceptions?
Right. Yeah, definitely. Those ones are definitely misconceptions, because no, like, I am definitely I'm very far from being rich, and getting funding for things is incredibly difficult. In many ways, you almost have to make a pilot to prove to people that you could make one. I feel like a lot of people think that if they have a really good idea, and just a really good idea, that everyone will like shower them with the funds they need. Which is unfortunate, because there are a lot of really good ideas that definitely deserve to be funded. But it takes so much kind of proving oneself and showing what you can do before people really can take notice, and to be able to stand on your own legs as an independent artist. So it's very hard. The dreaming aspect makes it seem like everything is going to be easy, but it requires so much sweat and tears to get anything made. Like, yeah, even just like I said, even the most mainstream like TV show or whatever requires so much work and so much so many miracles to get off the ground. It's wild.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. I've seen a lot of interviews, and I know. Oh my god, I think it's the creator of Adventure Time. He was talking about how he jumped from different from studios until he finally found a home in Cartoon Network, and it's just insane the process people have to go through to actually get what we see on the TV, and sometimes it's not even appreciative,
right,
which kind of sucks.
Yeah, it's true.
So what advice do you have for others wanting to go into the world of animation?
Ooh, yes. Let's see. I know definitely, like most trades and skills, a lot of it you just got to start doing it. It's easy to, like I said, it's easy to have an idea for animation, but it's and then never animate. Definitely recommend giving it a try. So practicing, learning to draw some stuff, being able to get out your ideas, whether that's through like just writing or making storyboards and drawing things. It's just really easy to just sit and fantasize about scenes and characters and then never actually make anything. And so the sooner you can start working on honing those skills to communicate those cool scenes, the better off you'll be down the line. So just getting started, that's the biggest advice.
How long would you say it took for you to hone your skills to get to where you are now?
Of course, as with any artist, I don't feel that my skills are as far along as I'd like to be. But let's see. It definitely, because I feel maybe after 3 or 4 years of like working on TV shows, I really started to feel like I understood the pipeline process for a lot of things. And in many ways, working, because I'm a harmony animator by trade, but I picked up a lot of things like making rigs and how good boards work and everything by kind of working alongside those other departments. So it definitely takes at least the magic number 3, at least 3 years of kind of practicing will get you somewhere. But it's always a lifelong challenge, and there's always skills that need development and can get better over time.
That's amazing. And my man, you may not think you're there, but I think you are there. I mean, your animation is impressive.
Thank you.
And I can't wait to see where it goes from here.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And lastly, what can people expect from future episodes for the upcoming season?
Ooh, yes. Definitely, like I said, this time around, we're going to meet more of characters. We'll have more lore introduced, a little more world building. I'm hoping to take us to some interesting new locations. Premise-wise, I'm thinking that this one, we're going to live up to the namesake of Dungeon Flippers. This one's going to be more about flipping a dungeon as opposed to house hunting. So we'll get to see a lot of the different aspects of the process that the Dungeon Flippers go through on a regular basis. So a lot of fun stuff to see.
Definitely looking forward to it. And I completely forgot to ask this. How do you know so much about real estate? Do you have like family members in the industry, or was it something that you were there before you got into animation?
I know less than I should for someone who's making a real estate show. Because in truth, a lot of it is based off of my interest in, or my enjoyment of watching HGTV shows, which kind of just skim off the top of what it is, the process that goes through real estate ventures. But I did work at a multiple listing service for a year, which is kind of like a database that real estate agents use. To keep track of all the different listings in a location. So I got to talk on the phone to a lot of very angry real estate agents. But nothing too close. Like I don't have any family members. Let's say my mom actually worked real estate once, way before I was born, and in some ways it was kind of an inspiration too, because she talked about how much she liked the idea of being in real estate because it's about finding a home for somebody, finding a perfect place, and then some of that goes into Molly's kind of motivations as a real estate agent, which sometimes kind of rubs against the more gritty and unfortunate part of being a real estate agent, dealing with unhappy clients and having a lot of rules and conditions to have to work with.
Yeah, no, and one thing I'm definitely looking forward to is Molly actually building her own dungeon. I can't wait for that to happen, because with how creative she is, I have a feeling that this dungeon is both going to be extremely deadly to any adventurer coming into them to raid it, and extremely friendly to all her friends at the same time, and that's going to be a very, very interesting balance.
Definitely.
Yeah, well, Travis, thank you so very much for coming onto the show. It has been an honor and a pleasure, and you are the first animator to come onto my show. So thank you very much for giving us that honor and making Dungeon Flippers as well.
Oh, thank you, Johnny. No, it was a pleasure to be invited. It's been a fun time talking to you.
Well, thank you. Hopefully you definitely enjoyed this interview, and hopefully we'll have you back and you'll be able to tell us more about the future episodes and everything else, and maybe give us some insights into the Atlantic, more insights into the Atlantic animation industry, because like I said, before this episode, I didn't even know there was one.
Right. No, definitely. I'd love to.
All right. Well, everybody, that's it for our episode. I hope you guys have a blessed one, and don't forget to check out Dungeon Flippers on YouTube, and definitely look out for future episodes, because if you haven't seen it already, you're definitely in for a fantastic and fun ride. So I'll see you guys later. Sayonara, see you later, and have a blessed one. Goodbye.